Hello friends! Timing out your animation and layering your drawings is done on the timeline, and it can feel a bit tricky at first, so let me show you the basics of getting it right. So I've got a brand new scene here. Let's create a new drawing level, and I'll create a vector level first by clicking the new vector level button. I'll name the level V so it's clear that it's the vector level. And the default action is that when you create a new level, it creates a new layer for that level and places the first drawing there. So this creates the first drawing for that level in a layer, which is actually called a column in Tahoma2D. And columns are essentially layers which define the layering of drawings on top of each other, with the ones high up the timeline are shown in front of the ones lower down, and you'll see that in a minute. But you can also change this order using the effects, which is why they're not actually called layers in the program. And columns might seem like a strange name, but that's just from the history of the program, where the default view of your animation timing wasn't a timeline view going left to right, but an egg sheet view with the columns going down the screen. So the drawings would actually be shown in columns. And you can still use this view if you want to. You can see an example of that in the stop motion room here, with the drawings going down. But today is all about the timeline. So the first thing I usually do is to name my column so it's clear what that contains. So just double click on the name of the column to put it into edit mode, and I'll call this one background, and then press enter. And I'll use this vector level for the background. So let's pop in a simple background, and I'll create one like I showed you last week using two rectangles filled with the gradient fill. And if you want to hear the full explanation of how to do that, check out my last video about the 3 drawing level types, where I showed the 3 types of drawings and a few basic drawing techniques, including adding gradient fills. And as I said last time, a level is a collection of related drawings, so I won't add any other drawings into this level, so let's create another level for my simple character. And I'll create a smart raster level for that. So hovering over the second button here at the top of the timeline, you can see in the status bar, this will create a new smart raster level. So clicking that, pressing OK, and then I'll rename the column to character, just so it's clear that's where my character is. So with the smart raster level drawing selected, I'll head over to choose the standard brush, and then I'll check over the options on the options bar. And it's always worth looking at these when you start a new drawing session, as the options you used last time will be saved and might not be what you want this time. So the last time I changed the minimum and maximum size for the brush. Let me change that back to perhaps 5 pixels for both. I think that's a bit small, so let's go slightly larger. And changing the minimum size to 10. That adjusts the maximum size, of course. Yes, that's quite chunky. And I'll increase the smoothing a little bit as well, just to get a neater line. And then let's colour him in. So picking a colour for his trousers first. Make that kind of a blue colour. This time we'll have a darker blue for his top and kind of a orangey kind of face. So choosing the bucket fill tool, again checking the options on the toolbar. Normal fill, I want to fill the areas. So choose the colour blue for his trousers, click to colour that in. Choose the colour for his top, click to colour that in, and then his face. And finally, the whites of his eyes. And that's the first drawing done. But to create an animation, of course, we want another drawing, so let's add one. And if you have the option on the left of the timeline toolbar selected, that means you can just draw in a blank frame and it will create a new drawing. So click in frame 2, still in the layer for the character, and with the brush tool selected, if I choose a palette entry, I can just start drawing, and a new drawing is created. Notice that it says 2 on it for drawing number 2, but it doesn't say SR in the box. Because it follows on from the previous drawing, we know that's from the same drawing level, SR. So let me just undo that and show you what happens if you don't have this ticked. So if I untick that, and then start drawing in frame number 2, no new drawing appears on the timeline, and I'm still drawing in drawing 1 of the level SR. And I like this way of working where drawings aren't created automatically. Whatever you see on screen, you can just draw over the top and you're editing that same drawing. So let me just undo that squiggly line and choose Save All. Remember, always choose Save All from the File menu to save all of your drawings and the information on your timeline. So I think the best way to create your next drawing is to intentionally create the drawing by right-clicking on the frame where you want the drawing and then choosing the command Create Blank Drawing, or by pressing the keyboard shortcut Alt-D. And now you can see drawing 1 isn't showing in the viewer, and you have 2 drawings on the timeline with drawing number 2 currently selected. Also notice that you can now see 2 drawings in the level strip on the right hand side here. And the level strip shows all of the drawings in your level, but I'll talk more about this another time, but just be aware that's what that's showing at the right hand side, and that it's over here. So now you can flip between your drawings by using the cursor keys to go back to the previous frame and then forward to the new one, ready to draw on. And this technique of moving between drawings can be useful for some styles of animation. But for ease today, let me just turn on the onion skin. And the onion skin is a way to see previous or the following drawings to make it easier to draw on the current drawing relative to the previous. So I'll explain this in more detail in another video, but for now, while on frame 2, if you just hover your pointer above frame 1 and you'll see 2 dots appear. You can click on either dot for what we're doing today, so I'll click on the bottom dot and you see it's connected by a line. And you'll also see drawing 1 appear on screen as an onion skin, and that's shown semi-transparent with a red hue about it. So let me draw the next frame, and I'll trace most of the character from the previous, but we'll make one small change. And with that done, I'll turn off the onion skin by pressing the red dot again, and then colour him in again using the bucket fill tool, selecting the palette entry and just tapping on screen like that. So there's a few ways you can play through your animation even with just these 2 drawings. So as I showed before, you can use your cursor keys on the keyboard to flip between the drawings. Or you can click and drag on the frame numbers at the top of the timeline to scrub through the animation. You can grab the scrub bar that's below the viewer here and slide from left to right to move between the frames. Or you can press the play button here. But you don't see much happening as it's only showing 2 drawings. And when the animation ends, the first frame becomes active again. And this jump into the beginning is a default setting that I don't really find useful, so I always like to change that once I've downloaded a new version of Tahoma2D. So again, head back to your preferences dialog, go to the preview section, and just untick the rewind after playback option. Then close the window. And now when you press play, the playhead stops on the last frame. And when you have more frames to your animation, this becomes so much more helpful. So I do suggest that you make this change. So hitting play just plays, showing frame 1, then frame 2, which is pretty boring and pretty short. So let's use the other way to play the animation, that's the loop play option. As you can see, just here. And that just keeps playing the animation forwards from the first frame to the last. But playing 2 frames side by side when we've set up the scene at 24 frames a second is a little quick. So let's slow it down. And let me show you 2 different ways to do that. So it's currently playing at 24 frames a second, as you can see here at the bottom right of the viewer. And we chose this when we first created the scene. But let's reduce that speed by clicking the arrows at the bottom right of the viewer, or by dragging the speed bar. And now playing it again on loop play, it plays much slower. And we can change the speed while it's playing too, to find the speed that feels more appropriate. But it's worth noting that this speed is just a preview while we animate. You change it elsewhere when you actually render your animation, but we'll get to that in another video. So the second way to slow down your animation is to space out your drawings. And we can do that by highlighting both drawings and choosing to show them on 2s. So click the first drawing, hold the Shift key and click the second. So now both drawings are selected. And then at the top of the timeline here, you can press the 2s button and that'll show each drawing for 2 frames. Or click the 3s button to show each drawing for 3 frames. And these buttons are a quick way to space out the timing if you have lots of drawings. Imagine selecting 100 drawings and then just clicking one button and suddenly the spacing has changed on all of them. A great time saver. And there are more options for spacing out your drawings, but again, we'll see those another time. But for a short animation, the simplest way to change the timing is simply click and drag to move the drawings. So let's click this second drawing and move it to frame 7 here. So that means that drawing number 1 will show for 6 frames, and then we'll see drawing 2. So pressing the rewind button at the bottom of the timeline and then pressing play. Notice that the play stops on frame 7. With drawing 1 being shown for 6 frames, we also want drawing 2 shown for 6 frames too. But Tahoma2D doesn't yet know how long you want the second drawing showing for. The playing time for a scene is decided by these 2 small white triangles in the timeline header, shown here on frame 1 and on frame 7. And they move as you add more drawings, but it can't know how long you want the last drawing to be shown for. So to adjust that, you can simply click and drag it and move that over to frame 12. And now when we rewind and press play, both drawings show for 6 frames. So you can see how that slowed down the animation. So let's increase the FPS again. Let's go to 12 frames per second. And rather than just seeing 2 drawings, let's click the loop play so it continually plays between those 2 drawings. And again, while it's playing, we can always change the speed. And now we can get a better feel for that movement. But there's one last play option that you might want to look into, and that's the ping pong option, as you can see here to the side of the loop play option. If you click that, the animation plays forward between those 2 play markers and then backwards. And this can be really useful to see a movement in the middle of a large animation. You can just drag the markers to that one small movement and ping pong between them. And the final thing to notice here is that each drawing is shown on all of the following frames until you hit another drawing. And this is because the default layout option is to use implicit holds. So once you've added a drawing, it's implied that you want to show it until you tell it to show something else. So if you didn't want your drawing to start showing until frame 3, you can click and drag your drawing to move it to frame 3. So on frames 1 and 2, you don't see the character until you hit frame 3. And if you wanted the second drawing to stop showing on frame 15 without anything else afterwards, you can simply right click on frame 15 and then choose stop frame hold. And that adds a stop frame to hold the animation there. So you'll notice an X appear on frame 15 and the implicit hold of the green frames showing from frame 8 to 14 are no longer visible. But you can still see all of the implicit holds for the background of the vector level continuing along the timeline. So if I move the play marker up to frame 24, rewind and then press loop play, you'll see drawing number 1 shown from frame 3, changing to drawing 2 on frame 7, then hiding drawing 2 from frame 15. And you can move this stop frame to change the timing just by clicking and dragging it, as you could for dragging a drawing. And if you want to remove it completely, you can just click on the stop frame and then press your delete key. And then drawing number 2 will continue to show again by the pale green background to all of the frames after frame 11. So next, let's take a quick look at reusing your drawings, because the drawings you've made don't have to be shown on screen just once. So let's add a new column, and you do that by left clicking on a column header here in the timeline, and then either right click on the column header and choose to insert a new column above the current one or below the current column. So I'll insert above, but notice the keyboard shortcuts that you can also use here. So let's choose the context menu option first, and you'll see a new blank column or layer appear here. Or if you prefer, you can just left click on a column header and then use the keyboard shortcut, the insert key, to insert a new column. and that inserts a column above the current one. But I only want one column for now, so I'll press undo to remove the last one. And then I'll click on one of the drawings of the character. Right clicking, I can choose copy cells, or again, I could have chosen the keyboard shortcut, Control-C, and then click in an empty cell in the new column, and I can just paste that drawing by using the keyboard shortcut, or from the edit menu, choosing paste cells. And this copies the exact same drawing into the other column. And you can tell that because you can see the drawing level name of SR for Smart Raster and drawing number 1. So it is literally the same drawing. And you won't see any difference in the viewer as one drawing is directly in front of the other. But here's a fun feature for you. If you choose the Animate tool, which is the very top tool on the toolbar, and make sure that you choose the Position option from the Options toolbar, and then you can click and drag on screen, and you move the selected drawing. And notice that you get the small diamond on the drawing on the timeline here, and that shows you've got an animation key set up for that layer. And this will apply for all drawings on this layer until you add another animation key. But again, we'll talk about the animation tool another time. So with the drawing repositioned, you can also scale it to make it smaller if you like. So from the Options toolbar, choose Scale, and then you can click and drag towards this little pink marker here to scale your character to make them smaller or larger, and then adjust the position again to place him where you want him to be. And then if I do the same with drawing number 2 by selecting it in the first column, I'll press Ctrl-C to copy it. I'll click in frame 11 in the new column and press Ctrl-V to paste the second drawing there. That'll allow me to have the 2 animation frames in that second column. So again, if I press loop play, you'll see the character waving. Let me just move the play marker to frame 3 so you don't get that flickering on frame 1 and 2, and press loop play again, and you can see that motion better. So let me just rename the second column so I don't get confused, and I'll call this one character 2. So we've got character 1 and character 2. But let me show you another way to have a copy of this animation. You can simply left click on a column and then press Ctrl-C to copy that column, and then Ctrl-V to paste the column straight away, and you get a third column with exactly the same drawings in it. So again, let me rename that column to be character 3. And because the column is duplicated, this third character is hiding behind the first one. So again, using the Animate tool in position mode, I can move him over here. And now we have all 3 characters waving. And the big thing to note here is that these copies of drawings are the exact same drawings, but shown in different layers. So if we change one drawing, maybe to make him smile, notice that they'll all change. And I'll show you more ways to work with drawings next time so that they're not the same. But they're all waving at the same time, which looks very mechanical. So let's finish by fixing that. So for character 2, let's just offset him by 1 frame. And to do that, we can just click and drag the drawings one at a time. And if we want to, we can move the second drawing an extra frame later, so we don't have the same timing as the first character. And then we can adjust the third character, but this time, let's move both drawings together. So click on one of the drawings, hold the Shift key, and then click on the second, and you'll see all the frames from 3 to 11 highlighted. And then when you drag one of them, both frames move together. And don't worry about these animation keys. With only one key in a layer, that'll apply to the whole layer wherever the key is placed. But of course, that'll give you this gap at the start of the animation. So let me bring back the first drawing to frame 3 there. And then hit loop play, and you can see them waving at a different time. And as you've already seen, you can overlap the position of the characters in 2 of the layers using the Animate tool. So if I change the character on the left hand side here in character 3's column, I can move him in front of that character, which doesn't seem right because he should be behind him, being smaller, he's further away. And we can adjust that by changing the order of the layers And you do that simply by dragging the layer header with the name in it. So click and drag higher or lower, up or down the timeline. So now character 3 is shown behind character 1. And as you play them, both drawings are shown behind. And if we want to, we can move this again. So he's shown just peeking at the right hand side here. And you can see the difference in the timing of the waves as well. So that's a quick rundown of some features of the timeline, but you can find more details and examples of the more hidden features of the timeline in my course, linked in the description and in the pinned comments down below. So as always, it's with great thanks to my patrons, especially my tea mugs and teapots who got this and every video early and without adverts. And they'll get my next one early too, in which I'll share more details and tips about creating and duplicating your drawings to speed up your animation process. So I'll see you there. And that's a guarantee.